Welcome to the Republican Professor. This morning we have with us Daniel Vargas. Welcome, Daniel.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're really happy to have you too. Daniel and I have known each other for, many years. I'm not sure how many years, but Daniel's trained in philosophy, got a graduate degree in philosophy. And Daniel, how did you get into philosophy?
So that's interesting. So I didn't set out to do philosophy. Uh, Interestingly enough, when I took philosophy undergrad, I hated it. Um, but
Wow.
yeah, well, I think it was the structure of the class. I didn't hate so much philosophy itself. It was just one of these intro classes where they just threw the whole ocean at you in one shot. So it's like, okay, we're going to spend 2 weeks on metaphysics, 2 weeks on epistemology, 2 weeks on this. And it was just like, oh, what am I doing here?
Wrong approach. That's the wrong approach, I think.
Yeah, it was bad. So I didn't leave with a very positive view of studying philosophy. But then after I finished my bachelor's, I'm trying to get into a master's program. And at first I was thinking, well, maybe I should do something like apologetics or something like that. And then I realized, well, apologetics is kind of like philosophy of religion light. So why not just do the real thing?
Oh man, we're upsetting all the apologetics people.
But yeah, so basically that's what led me in that route. And then I started looking at schools, and that led me to Biola.
Yeah, all the apologetics people. Well, you know, what you do is basically like a really shallow version of what we do, but you know.
Well, I wouldn't put it that way.
No, I know. That's my characterization. Danny's off the hook on that. Danny, but you went from a crappy experience for your undergrad philosophy to getting how in the world do you think, oh yeah, I'm going to get a master's in this now? I mean, where did you go to college?
So I did my undergrad at Liberty. So I have a weird academic background. So I graduated high school. I went right into college, and I was doing engineering. So I was doing electrical engineering at first. Then I switched that out. I switched out to computer engineering, but I was young and dumb, so I didn't go to class, and I ended up flunking out. But I really liked what I was doing. I really liked computer science. I really liked programming. So I just went and got a job somewhere where they would hire me, just doing like some intern nonsense. But I just made a career that way over the years, just getting crappy job after crappy job until eventually I got a job where somebody told me, I was like, oh, we won't make you do that. You're much too senior. And I'm like, what? I'm senior? Really? Like I didn't realize I had made it,
Wow. And what powers came with this senior? Could you tell people to get coffee for you?
Not quite, but definitely I wasn't getting the crappy jobs, or I wasn't having to go and fix anybody's monitor because it was dim anymore. I I was strictly doing, software engineering at that point.
So you failed out, but you passed enough to get your degree?
Yeah. So basically, the couple of computer science classes I took, I loved them so much. I went beyond the material. Like I actually went through the entire book that they gave us before the class was even over, and I was like, I want more. So I just went and started looking for more books. This was in the time where this is pre-Google. So we're talking like, late 90s.
You're an old man.
I am an old man. I am 40. I'll be 42 this year. So
did they even have Yahoo back then?
Yeah, Yahoo was like just starting out, I think. But yeah, I think that was like the only major search. It was Yahoo and like MSN. It was like the only real search engine. Oh, there was another one, Alta Vista, I think it was called, which is like completely defunct now. But yeah, so there was no Google. So it was basically like, I'm going to like my local Barnes and Nobles and go to the computer science section and pick up some books. No Amazon either. So I was actually going to physical brick and mortar store for books.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just started, just became ravenous, right? I just wanted, I just read as much as I could on this, and I would come home, and even as I worked, I would come home and do it. So I'd go to work, And then when I was done with work, I would come home and just do projects for myself and just kept, grinding and doing it. And I kind of just put my head down and did it for years. And then eventually, I guess all of this, like knowledge just kind of coalesced, and I had kind of made it to a certain level where other people could recognize that I actually knew something for a change.
So you got your degree, and what was it that you finally got your degree in?
So eventually, I just got a degree in religion from a bachelor's in religion from Liberty University. I just did it online. I living in New Jersey. Liberty is down in Virginia, but I could do it online. So it was something that I could do while I was working and doing everything else. It took me a while. I had a couple kids in between, so it took me quite a bit to get my bachelor's. But once I did it, it was kind of like, well, I'm going to do something else. I'm on a roll here. I might as well keep it going. So that's when I found Biola.
Sorry for clearing my throat there. How did Liberty get on your radar? Because that's kind of a far. Well, I mean, Virginia and New Jersey aren't exactly right next to each other. So
yeah. I think at the time I was looking into schools, and I looked at schools in the area, but obviously there was the time commitment, the fact that at the time, working full time, had a family with a couple of young kids. Well, I had one kid at the time, and I think another one was born soon after. So I couldn't dedicate the time to just go sit in a classroom. So I started looking. Well, are there any online programs? So I started just kind of. Now at this point there was Google, so I was able to Google this. And I saw that Liberty at the time was voted one of the top schools for online learning. I think they were kind of like a pioneer in the space, apparently. Not a lot of schools were really doing this, where they had full-time programs, like you could do the entire program online. So I found Liberty, and it was convenient. For a private university, it wasn't super expensive. So it just kind of worked out for me.
Okay, makes sense. What year was that that they had already developed that?
I started, I think it was summer 2009.
Okay. Yeah, online learning, really, they must have really been cutting edge, because I got certified to teach online for the first time in 2009. And I remember
exactly.
the philosophy.
So they were really.
Yeah. I remember I was the first philosophy faculty to be certified to teach online at one of the colleges I was at, Moore Park College. And everybody was looking at me like I had some kind of I was just cutting edge or something like that. Of course, I didn't feel that way at all. I thought that this is the end of civilization. But I don't know. I mean, I know you personally, so I feel like, well, maybe online education is not so bad if it lets people like Daniel go to college. I mean, I can imagine what you were dealing with as far as your schedule and stuff. Was it really that helpful to be able to go online? Did you feel like you benefited from that?
So I think certain classes, yes. Honestly, I think with online education, but this is probably true of even in-person education. I think a lot has to do with the individual, how much you want it, how much you want to be there, right? This was me coming back to school now in my late 20s for something I wanted to study and I wanted to be there, right? So this wasn't even me trying to get a career out of this. This was just, hey, I want knowledge for myself. So I was motivated to do this. Right. I wasn't just some kid who's my parents are making them go to college and they're just I'm taking online classes just because it's what requires the least amount of work. But really it was just because I needed to support my family and I had to work, 9 to 5. And this allowed me to actually get the formal studies while doing it on my own schedule.
And so you were working in computers without a degree. That's how good you were, apparently. I mean, you knew enough to be able to get a job doing something.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's computer science is one of those really interesting fields where having a degree does not necessarily mean you're good, and not having one does not mean you're not good, right? I've been at jobs where just before I even got my bachelor's, I'd been at jobs where essentially all I had was a high school diploma. And I remember interviewing people with PhDs in computer science who knew nothing, right? I mean,
Wow.
they knew some very narrow, kind of obscure thing that they studied, right? And they did some project on, but they had no idea how to make things work in the real world. You know, there's a joke for computer scientists. It's like, you know, you've never cut your teeth until you've overwritten a bunch of files in a database in a production database, right? That's live. Like that's when you know you're a programmer, when you've made like a really bad mistake and you have to roll it back like on the fly, or your job is on the line. That's how you know you've made it. So these are people who went to school, they kept going to school, but they've never done it in the field. So, and I'm not disparaging anyone from going to school for computer science or anything like that, but there's a certain amount of experience that you can only get on the job. You're never going to get it from just going to school and learning from, you know, books and professors. So it's definitely one of those kind of unique fields, I think. Like I wouldn't want that from a surgeon, right? I don't want a surgeon who's like, hey, I learned this on my own.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever walked back one of your mistakes during surgery there, Mr. Surgeon?
Exactly.
Yeah. So you were a programmer? Were you a programmer?
I'm a programmer.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a programmer.
I don't even know what that means, to be honest with you. I think I have a really Fred Flintstone type of view of what it is, probably compared to what you know about it.
Yeah, so I mean, essentially, I make computers do things that I want them to do. I mean, that is honestly what a programmer does, right? You know how to write in these computer programming languages, and essentially you're issuing commands to the computer to do things, to solve certain problems. You know, it's interesting because most people think like they think programming and they think to movies they've watched where they show some hacker and the dude is just like banging on the keys like a million miles a minute, like, you know, and like, oh, that's a hacker. And it's like anyone who's done it in computer science are like, what's he doing? He's going to ruin his keyboard. You know, a lot of programming is me literally just staring at the ceiling and like coming up with a way to solve a problem in the most efficient manner, right? It's a lot of problem solving and critical thinking involved in this.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, which interestingly enough, going into philosophy, it wasn't that hard of a transition. Actually, like I remember taking logic and just sit there like, oh, this is just what I do for a living. This is just kind of what I do, but it's just I apply it. I don't have like, you know, I didn't know all the symbolic stuff, but this is just kind of what I do.
Gotcha. Okay. Who did you have logic with?
I took it with Tim Pickavance.
Tim. Oh, wait. Did you take that at the graduate level or the undergrad?
Yeah, graduate.
Really? Okay, cool. I guess he's now like the interim dean over there. Can you believe that?
Yeah. That's he's risen up the ranks, right?
I guess so. He must have a house payment. No, I'm sure he's doing a great job. Now, so you're like a Renaissance guy, basically, then. I mean, you have these insatiable curiosity about computers. You have obviously some kind of facility, probably some inborn talent, and you've refined that over many years of experience and trial and error and all that stuff. But then you also have this deep desire to learn more about religion and philosophy and stuff like that. That's not really exactly required for your job. What's that sourced in?
I mean, I was raised in church. My parents are actually pastors. But we came from a kind of a fundamentalist sort of background. Very kind of don't ask too many questions, don't think too hard about this sort of things.
Anti-intellectual?
Very anti-intellectual. Yeah. In a weird way, though. So anti-intellectual about religious matters, not about secular matters. Yeah. Right. So go to school and become a doctor, become a lawyer, do all these things, but don't study too much when it comes to the Bible.
Man, that
So
sounds exactly like the church I grew up in. Holy cow, that's funny. Did
yeah,
you guys
it's
speak in tongues?
yeah,
Was
the
it
charismatic,
Pentecostal?
yeah, Pentecostal.
Oh, that's exactly like that is so weird that I was
Yeah,
able to predict that.
yeah. So it's kind of this weird dichotomy where it's very like ad hoc anti-intellectualism. And that just didn't sit well with me because again, I have this ravenous need to understand and like deeply understand what I believe, and it was never satisfying to me. I always remember having questions, and I remember even growing up, some of the traditions I think that were kind of, I would call them extra biblical. That I just, especially like a lot of the do's and don'ts, where I'm just like, all right, I'm reading my Bible, and like I just don't like, where does this come from? Like, can I get an answer? And they're just like, well, this is just the way we do things. Oh, okay, but why do we do that? Where did it come from? And it's like, well, no, you don't ask me the questions. You're gonna lose your faith. You won't ever have a, and then they have these flashy words. You won't have anointing or all these other terms if you ask too many questions. And I remember thinking like, but okay, can I just get a definition here though? Like, so I remember thinking, well, I got to study this. It's not enough for me just to like get it from somebody with, and not be able to see this for myself. Like, I need to get at the heart of this stuff.
So you're a little kid like this. Were the pastors, were they your parents?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a different dynamic than I had.
Yeah, that was an
There
interesting
was
dynamic.
one layer, the pastor was one layer removed from me because he wasn't a part of our family.
Hmm.
So, I kind of always blamed it on him and them, but that's got to be really frustrating if you're anything like me to have deep questions and puzzles and just stuff. And you feel like people don't take your questions seriously.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, I had my wild child rebellious stage, in my teens and into my early 20s, where I would go to church because it was a requirement for continuing to live under my parents' roof. So I didn't want to have to go pay rent. So I would go to church. But yeah, I wasn't at all a Christian in any meaningful sense of that word. Um, but yeah, it was, the dynamic was interesting. And again, fascinating because my parents themselves, they were professionals in their country, right? So my parents were born in they were born in the Dominican Republic. My dad was a physician, he was a doctor, and my mom was a high school teacher. Um, and they actually moved to Venezuela in the 70s, when the time when Venezuela was a very, very prosperous country. And they were inviting professionals from all over Latin America to, like, basically they had more jobs than they had professionals to fill these jobs. So we go all over
Yeah.
Latin America inviting people to come and work there. So my parents
Yeah.
moved there.
I've heard of that era of Venezuela, and it seems like a different
Night and
universe.
day. Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely.
Wow.
But I remember growing up, and my parents always, they always fostered my sense of curiosity. My mom would teach me, like, my mom taught me how to read and write before I even got to preschool, just because I just wanted to learn. I was always interested in things. So they fostered the curiosity, but then it was like only to a certain point, right? When it went to certain matters, the curiosity wasn't as much accepted. So there was like that kind of interesting dichotomy for me, which again, as a kid, you don't really understand. You're just kind of like,
Right.
oh, okay.
Was there a
But
shame involved? Like, did you, not saying that that would be their conscious thing, but I'm just saying, did you feel shame for having interests and curiosity that went beyond what was allowed?
I don't know if I felt shame. I think the responses would be, because they would have like the type of responses were like these shutdown responses, right? Where it was just kind of like this is just a brute fact, right? And you just can't analyze this any further. So again, as a kid, you kind of say, oh, okay. Like I think more because you realize that you're not going to get anything more. You can't press the subject anymore. So I wouldn't say that there was shame, and I, I don't want to make it seem like my parents ever shamed me for being curious, because I don't think I ever felt that. But there was just like this kind of hard stops, There was like, well, this can't be approved any further. It's a faith matter, right? So you just can't. Yeah, there was certainly a divorce between faith and reason in the way that things were approached.
Gotcha. Did you ever push those boundaries, and did you ever get resistance if you did?
As I got older, I think I pushed the boundaries a little more, and pushed them, and I did face resistance. And I think I think at that time though, I just kind of said, okay, well, I'm not going to get the answers here, so I'll just find the answers for myself, right? Like I was the quiet rebel. So I was the one who'd be like, to your face, I'm just like, man, I'm going to go rebel over there. So yeah. I've never been kind of confrontational in that sense. So I would just say, okay, whatever. Then I'll just go, gotcha. See where I can find these answers.
Yeah. So that somehow led you into apologetics right away, or did?
So my experience with apologetics was interesting. So obviously, this individual has been obviously disgraced, but I remember being maybe early.
Oh, I think I know who you're going to say.
Yeah. So it's probably about 19, I think. I remember I used to drive to my parents would go, or before me to church, and I would drive to church. I remember on this local radio station on Sunday mornings, this gentleman would come on and they would have him speak on the faith. But he would speak in like this very eloquent and intellectual way that was just, it's not something I was accustomed to. For some reason, the show.
Are you talking about Ravi Zacharias?
Yes, it was Ravi Zacharias.
That's what I was thinking.
Eventually,
he was very good. He was very good at what he did. That's right.
And I remember at the time, there was no other voices I had ever heard of, especially within my context, who could speak to the faith in such an intellectual way. And then I remember years, the show went off the air for some reason. I never heard of him again until years later, where it was like, I ran into it and I saw him and I was like, oh, this is the guy I used to listen to, and that kind of sparked an interest in me in saying, wait, he can't be the only one. Then there have to be other people who are speaking to this and speaking and thinking about faith and reason and all these things. And that kind of started my journey into kind of getting into the intellectual side of the faith.
Okay, that makes sense. So you fail out of college in your early 20s, right? You go to work. Do I have this right?
Yeah, about 19. About 19,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So you go to work in computers pretty early.
Mm-hmm.
You get a lot of experience. You're getting into your mid and late 20s and you're thinking, I want more training. I want a degree.
Mm-hmm.
You snoop around online, you find Liberty. Liberty happens to have some training in the area you want, and it's online. It's accessible to you now in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to hop through Joe Biden's little encampment there in Delaware. You can go straight to Virginia classroom online. I got that right so far?
Yep.
What was your favorite class that you took at Liberty Online?
So it's interesting. It's going to be probably not what you'd expect. So my favorite class was actually an evangelism class and missions class.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah. So how would I put it? So, well, at the time, one of the reasons I actually went to school was because it was sort of expected that I was going to succeed my father as the pastor of the church he was in. And again, I have all these questions. I have all these kind of unanswered questions, really. And I'm thinking, okay, I need to study. I need to get some of this for myself. And while I'd always helped out in the church and been involved in various forms of ministry, I wasn't convinced that this was for me. And I remember taking this class, and it was no, it wasn't an evangelist class. It was I think it was a leadership class or missions class, something like that. And I remember one of the things that the professor said in the lecture kind of stuck with me, has always stuck with me. He said this. He said, if you're considering vocational ministry, right? Ask yourself this question. If you can see, or think of this statement, if you can see yourself doing anything else, then do that instead. If you're considering vocational ministry, but you can see yourself doing something else, you should probably do that instead. You should only do vocational ministry if it is the only thing you can imagine doing. This is your life's calling. You feel it, that the Lord is prompting you in this direction. You feel that, the burning in the bosom, so to speak. Then this is for you. But if you have all these doubts and you have all these things that you probably rather do, and this is just kind of like then don't do it. Or it's either not for you or it's not the time for you. And that's something that was very impactful for me, I think, because again, I'm sitting there with all these doubts, and I'm thinking, do I do this? Do I not do this? And here along comes this professor who doesn't know me, right? This isn't live. I'm watching a lecture, and says this, and it really impacted me because, to be honest, there was a whole lot of things I think I would rather have done than got into vocational ministry. Not because I think there's anything wrong with it, just I didn't feel called to it. So then that further led me to say, well, then I want to keep studying. I want to keep, doing some things in this area because I like the faith, or I like the intellectual parts of the faith, and I want to, I really want to deepen myself in that, and that led me, along the path down to Biola.
Wow, that's very interesting. That makes a lot of sense. When was it that you had the idea to do a master's degree in person and uproot yourself and your family, right? Because you had a family.
Yeah.
You had 2 kids, is that right?
Yeah, 2 kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
And New Jersey isn't exactly close to Biola.
Not at all.
So to do an in-person philosophy graduate program, how did that process look in your mind?
Yeah, so I think I finished the bachelor's. I remember, finishing my last classes, and then thinking, okay, what's next, right? Kind of said I had the bug. I wanted to learn some more, and I taken a lot of the theology classes, all these things, but I wanted some more of that deep intellectual thinking. So, like I said, I started thinking, well, let me do something on maybe apologetics, and I looked at Liberty to see what kinds of programs they had. And I remember that they didn't really have any masters in apologetics at the time. They had something like a doctorate in theology and apologetics, but it didn't sound like what I wanted to do. So I started looking at other schools to see what was around that I could do online. And I think I looked at Regent University and a couple others. But none of the programs were kind of jumping out at me. So then I started doing some more searching and saying, well, is a master's online as good? And then obviously most people said no. You're going to be benefited by being in person, get to know your professors. You've been able to ask questions. Then I was looking at, okay, let me look at apologetics programs that are not online. So I think I saw where's the one in Texas that Norm Geisler was in? I forgot the school.
I can't remember. Oh, you mean at back in Texas?
Yeah, Norm Geisler
Dallas
was there.
Seminary.
Yeah, I think Dallas, because then Norm Geisler went and found his own school, but I think it was Dallas Theological Seminary had a program. I remember looking at one I think it was in Chicago. What's the name of the one in Chicago? It's completely escaping me.
Trinity.
Trinity. Yeah. And then I found Biola, right? These were like the top rated programs in the nation. And I'm looking and I'm like, okay, well, I was looking at apologetic programs. Then I look at the apologetics programs and these different things. I'm comparing them. Then I just, let me do a little search. And I don't know how I found this one article that was like, well, if you're considering doing an MA on apologetics, when do you consider doing one in philosophy instead? Like, well, why would I want to do that? So I kind of start, following this whole breadcrumb until I realized, hey, maybe I do want to do philosophy. Maybe I want to get, because the last thing I wanted to do was go get a master's and then still feel like I have all these unanswered questions that just didn't go deep enough. So that's what that led me. Well, let me look at philosophy, and I realized, well, Biola also has a philosophy program, and it's like really highly rated. And one of the things you could do is you could go and get a PhD if you wanted to in the future. So that kind of cemented it for me. But then, like you said, okay, California and New Jersey, kind of far from each other. I need to be able to feed my family. So that's how's that going to happen? So there was a lot of things that had to kind of fall into place. So I literally just kind of prayed and said, okay, if this is what you want me to do, Lord, all right, I'm just going to apply and see what happens. And I'm going to talk to my job and see if they'd let me work from home for all the time, and see if they'd be okay with me going and doing this master's across the country. And I'm going to talk to my family and see if they don't completely freak out about me leaving. So I kind of just had all these things that just seemed kind of impossible, and they just all lined up, right? One after another. I went to my job. I had to fill up a bunch of paperwork and get like permission from like people like 3-4 levels above me, and it went through, and I got permission. Talk to my family, and they were like, well, if this is what you feel you need to do, go ahead, go for it. I got accepted into the program at Biola, and it was just like, okay, maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So things just kind of lined up that way.
Wow, you must be very well liked at your job. They must have a lot of faith in you.
Yeah, it was. My job was at that point, I'd been at a job, I think, a couple of years, or maybe a year or two, and that job was always very lax. And we actually worked from home about 3 days a week, and then went into the office twice a week. So it wasn't like okay. At least my argument was, I'm just asking for 2 more days, right? I'm already working from home 3 days a week, and my boss was okay with it. He liked my the work that I did, and he was happy with my work, and he signed off on it, and then we just went up a couple of chains. And I think I worked for an education company. I actually still work for the same company. And one of the things that I said was like, I think I'd be interested in teaching eventually. And so that was kind of like the appeal we made. So they're, kind of like going up the chain. They're like, well, can we really say no to this guy as an education company who wants to get into education? So I think that kind of appeal helped.
That makes sense.
So, yeah.
So now I'm curious about, you're working 5 days a week. Did you have Zoom back then, or how are you doing meetings on Google Hangout or Skype, or what are you using?
Yeah. So at this
or
time,
is it,
we're using...
is it really meetings? Is it all through email, or is it phone, or what?
No, we do meetings. So we do what's called a stand-up meeting. So it's a daily meeting where we kind of give a status report on what we're working on. I think that one of the things that helped was that our team has always been a distributed team. So the main developers were all in this office in New Jersey. However, our product managers are all over the place. So like one's in London, one's in, I think, Minnesota or Wisconsin or something out there. So our team, our larger team has always been pretty distributed. So I have people on my team I've worked with for 9-10 years that I've never met in person. And then on top of that, we added a team out in Sri Lanka who was supporting us basically when we were off, they were working, and they would manage some things. So basically all of our meetings, even when we went to the office, we would still have this kind of virtual meeting happening because we had people who just couldn't physically be there. So we've always kind of run the team that way. So it was just an extension of that. And then fast forward a couple of years later, so the company decided to consolidate a bunch of offices they had into this one brand new larger building, but it was very far away from most people. So my entire team just started working from home. So everybody on my team works from home now, 100%. So that just became the status quo.
Gotcha. Now, but how did you fit coursework in, though? I mean,
hard, very hard.
How many classes were you taking every semester?
So I was taking a full load every semester. So I think that was...
So how do you do the 8 hours? How do you put the 8 hours in? Or I mean, assuming
so I was working
I
was working a shift this schedule. So I would log in the morning really early, check out my email from the night before, do some things. Then I would head to class because I would have some classes during the day. Then I would finish some classes. I would log back in. I would have my computer with me. I would log back in, do a couple of things. Then I go back to whatever classes I had. Then I'd come home, spend a little time with the family, and then I'd work and study into the night. So I didn't get a whole lot of sleep during those couple of years.
Yeah, how much sleep did you get?
Not a lot, maybe 5-6 hours a night. especially during the semester. There were some very, very long weekends, and having to obviously jump headfirst into the philosophy. I remember my first philosophy course was Metaphysics with J.P. Moreland, and I remember thinking, I'm in trouble. I don't understand the word. I hear words, they sound like English. I know what some of these words are, but when you put them together that way, I don't know what you're talking about. So it took a while.
Speaking of English, how long have you spoken English? Because your first language is Spanish, right?
Yeah, so I got here when I was 8, about 8 going on 9.
Did you speak any English when you got here?
No, I didn't speak any English.
Really?
So I learned by full immersion. Basically, I got thrown into a school district where there were no Spanish speakers other than my cousin. No professor, none of the teachers spoke Spanish. Sorry, Spanish. None of the teachers spoke Spanish. Only so there was no like some places have ESL, like they have English as a second language or things like that. There was no program like that in the school that I was in.
This is a public school?
This is a public school, but it was a school district that was, the population was like 95% Caucasian and Jewish. I think
in New Jersey?
In New Jersey, yeah. So there was this like one other black girl in the school.
What's the name of the town?
It's called Fairlawn.
Okay.
I'm sure the demographics have changed over time, but at the time it was basically all white. And Jewish. So we got like the Jewish holidays off in that school district.
Were you traumatized? Oh, you got the Jewish holidays off. Oh, that says a lot. So was it across the river? Was it across from New York? I don't know where it is.
Fairlawn is North New Jersey. Yeah, so it's like across the river. It's maybe a half hour, probably less from New York. So not very far. Yeah, but it was basically a pocket where it's like you drive 5 minutes and you're like in like an area that's predominantly Black and Hispanic. So it was just like a pocket that was like pretty much all white and Jewish people.
Gotcha.
So basically I was in class, nobody could speak to me.
Yeah.
And
do you have memories of that?
I do.
Confused?
I have some interesting memories of that. I remember not understanding things at the time, but remembering them later and realizing what it was that was happening. So because then at that point I could remember, and then I knew what the heck they were saying. So I remember that I remember going to class in the first few days and people talking to me really slow. And I remember I was like 9 years old and thinking like, it doesn't matter how slow you say it, I don't know the word. Right? They come up to me and say, take out your notebook. I'm like, speed isn't the problem here.
Yeah.
I don't know the vocabulary.
Yeah. That's hilarious. That is so funny, man.
Yeah, it was an interesting experience.
I can't believe that. So do you know the story of why your parents came here and how they got here?
I do. I do actually.
We'll get back to metaphysics with JP momentarily. We're just taking a side step here because I realized we've skipped that.
Yeah, no worries. So my dad, like I said, my parents had moved to Venezuela, and they were living there. They lived there 7 years, I think. No, sorry, they lived in 13 years. I think they lived almost 13 years. That's what it was.
What city was it that they lived?
So we lived in they lived in 3 different towns. The largest ones of those was called Mene Grande.
Say it again.
Mene Grande. MENE and then GRANDE. It's so for those who might not know, Venezuela is very oil rich. So outside of our town, there were oil fields where the oil would literally burst from the ground, and you would see it burning up in the sun. That's how much oil there was in the area where I grew up.
Wow.
So that was the town that I remember the most because it was the last one we lived in. But at the time, my dad hadn't seen his family in a very long time. And his mom, his father, and all 14 of his brothers and sisters had moved to the United States and had all become United States citizens. So he was the only one who had never been and had nothing. So at the time, my grandfather got diagnosed with I think it was tongue cancer. think it was. And my dad hadn't seen him in very long, so he wanted to see him before he passed. So we petitioned to get tourist visas, and we get denied because they said, no, you have way too much family in the United States. Just have them petition you for a residency, for a green card. So my grandmother petitioned my dad and by proxy me and my mom for a green card. So we come here not to move, but to visit, to spend some time here, get to know our family. For me to get to know my family, I knew almost nobody in my family, and for my dad to see his dad before he passed. So we get
what
here.
year was that, do you think?
This was 1989. Yeah, 1989. So we get here. Me and my mom, we get our paperwork. I guess we were living with my aunt at the time in her basement, and my dad is sitting there, and my dad doesn't get his paperwork, so he can't leave the country, because if he leaves, he can't come back in. So my mom is traveling back and forth to manage some of their stuff. They had a house. My dad had a private practice. So a bunch of stuff. And so that's at that time was when they enrolled me in school, because it's like, well, we're here, let's enroll them in school. So my dad, who was a physician, a very successful physician in his town, is here doing nothing. So he's like, I think he was he got a job delivering newspapers at 4 a.m. in the morning for like the, not the Times. I forget which paper it was. It was some big paper at the time. So he was literally just like a newspaper delivery boy, just at 4 a.m. in the morning, like tossing papers into people's lawns and stuff like that, just to do something with his time. And then at that time, my dad felt the urge to, he says he felt like the Lord calling him to full-time vocational ministry. And he got offered a small church to pastor here. So one thing led to another. They ended up selling everything. Also, at the time, Venezuela crashed. That's about that year. I think it was late 89 or early 90 when the currency crashed in Venezuela. So before that, the currency, I think, was like 4-1 to the dollar. So it was like 4 something Venezuelan bolivares. That was the currency, to $1. So it was very close. It stayed there, but apparently it's a lot of corruption, and it had stayed that way because of just some shady things that the presidents had been doing. So all of that stuff came out, and the currency just crashed. So my parents ended up losing pretty much everything.
Wow.
Because when they ended up selling their home, which cost them, I don't know how much money to make, they got like not even a tenth of that once they converted the currency. So they ended up having to basically start from zero in their 40s.
Wow.
Or 40s, 30s, I can't remember how old they were.
Wow.
But yeah, they had basically started.
And they didn't
from zero
speak
here.
any English? Did they speak English at all?
Not really. My parents didn't really speak English. So yeah, so it was, they started pastoring a Spanish speaking church. So obviously that helped. And eventually, I think 5 years later, my dad became a citizen. At that time, I was 15, I think, or 14 going on 15. So I don't know if the laws are the same, but at the time, if you were less than 16 years old and one of your parents became a citizen, you basically could automatically get citizenship. So all you had to do was basically go sign your name somewhere. So I remember going through that process and then becoming a citizen so that I could apply for scholarships for college.
Cool. Now, obviously you missed the whole Chavez era and the guy before him.
Yeah.
The socialism and all that. I don't know how much socialism was there in Venezuela at the time, in the 80s, but you obviously are probably pretty sad about missing out on that aspect of Venezuela, the whole Chavez.
Oh yeah.
No, you're a socialist, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We're just assuming you're a socialist.
Viva Che,
because you're from New Jersey. But wow, do you have it? When you see what's happened in Venezuela, do you have any emotions about that?
Well, it's definitely sad to see what happened. There was a lady who left with my parents, who was my parents' friend, who actually moved to Venezuela at the same time my parents did in the mid 70s, I think it was. So she moved first. She was also a physician, a doctor, and then her family moved. So she had, I think it was 6 kids, all older than me, and her husband. So they all moved to Venezuela. And when we left, they actually stayed. So they lived through the entire Chavez era. And interestingly, some of them were Chavez supporters in the beginning. And they quickly repented from that as they began to see what happened to the country. Basically, it's it's a very complicated matter. It's obviously socialism was just a plague, but the country itself was basically on a downturn before that because of the rampant corruption from the previous leaderships. I think I can't remember the name of the president, Carlos Andres Perez, I think was one of the previous presidents who was like a complete crook. So he basically bankrupted the country. So then Chavez basically rose to power. He was a military guy, rose to power by promising basically, I'm going to give out houses, I'm going to give out food. And he eventually did do some of these things by, for example, if you had two homes, they would confiscate one of them. The government would just come and take one and then give it away to somebody else. If you had businesses, they would levy all kinds of things. One of these, this lady that I mentioned, one of her children, he was I guess he was like a chemical engineer, and but he specialized in petroleum, because obviously it's a big field over there. Apparently he signed some petition at the time, kind of denouncing one of Chavez's policies, and he got blacklisted. So he couldn't find work, even like in a car wash. Like he lost his job that he had, a very a well-paying job at the time, and then he found some other very rinky-dink job just to afford to live. And when they found, like, eventually they found out that he was on this list, and they fired him from there too. So he actually ended up coming here and under a what's the name of that petition? Asylum. He came under a political asylum because basically, if you can't work, and the government is preventing you from working because of a dissenting opinion, that's essentially persecution. So, he eventually came here, and I think he eventually got citizenship here, and I believe he's living in Texas somewhere, working well now. But yeah, I know stories. I didn't see it for myself, but I know a lot of people who still live there and who saw that the average Venezuelan citizen lost an average of 20-30 pounds, not because they found some amazing diet, but because there was such food shortages.
My goodness.
People going 6-7 months without being able to eat meat, not because they've gone vegan, but because there literally was no meat to eat.
Wow.
So it was terrible. I think it's normalized a little. It's definitely not gone back to something that it's desirable, but I think some of the craziness is normalized a little, but it's still pretty bad.
It's an amazing story. Where did your parents get their training?
So my parents, how should I call it? They went to college at oh my God, the name is I know the initials. It's UAS. I think the translation would be the Autonomous University of Santo Domingo or something like that. Okay. I can't remember, but basically they both went to the same school, same college. It's like a public college in Dominican Republic.
Gotcha.
And my dad, he studied to be a physician. My mom studied to be a teacher.
And your dad got his medical degree?
He had a medical degree. He practiced in the Dominican Republic. Then he went to Venezuela and he practiced there, but he had to do some further studies because when you go from one country to another, I think for medical degrees, you can't just go and practice. You have to go and basically, I think, redo like your residency or something. So I remember my dad being gone for long periods of time when I was really small to finish that up.
Wow. That's a lot to take in, especially the picture of all those people that supported Chavez and then figured out they made a mistake, but it was too late.
Yeah,
it's too late to do anything about it. And that really is such a common story with people that support socialism. Mm-hmm. So you're in Southern California in JP's metaphysics class, and you're working full time. You have 2 kids. I cannot even imagine how you were feeling at that point. Maybe tell people what JP's metaphysics class is like. I mean, it's not Barnes and Noble metaphysics. It's not like crystals and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, it's not that
Yeah.
kind of metaphysics, right? This is the study of, I guess, reality, if you want to put it that way. It's somebody described it this way, and I think it's probably the most apt description. It's like trying to drink out of a fire hydrant. That is what JP's metaphysics class
Sounds
is like.
right. Sounds about right. Yep.
Imagine the picture where you open a fire hydrant and you're trying to drink out of this torrent of water where you can't even breathe. That is what taking this class was like. It was rough. I remember my first couple of weeks thinking I made a horrible mistake. I just moved my family over here for nothing. I am going to fail this class. But you know, eventually you do the work, and it starts to crystallize in your head, right? Eventually words start to make sense.
Yeah, a lot of it is vocabulary because it's a vocab rich field like anything else is. There's a very specific way of getting at what you're talking about, and sometimes the vocab is everything hinges on it because a lot of times there's disagreement about what those words mean or what's implied. And there's a lot of reading. The reading is dense. You know, wouldn't you describe it that way? It's like,
oh my goodness,
wading through wet concrete.
I remember reading through a page of, I think it was Roderick Chisholm, and literally reading this page and then reading it again. I think I read it almost 5 times and still not understanding a word, and thinking like, what is happening? Like I speak English. Like, what is happening? I don't understand. Why don't I understand anything on this page?
Yeah, and that's very common with philosophy. That's very common. People will describe they've never had to read something more than once before. Maybe twice, maybe, but it's not uncommon to have to read something 3 times and still feel like you're making progress, but you still don't get all of it.
Or feeling like, I got it. Nope, lost it again. I thought I had it.
Or yeah, you had it for a moment and then it's gone.
This is gone. Yeah. It's like you're trying to I feel like it's like you're trying to cold water in your fist. You're like, right. Oh yeah, it's gone again.
Well, that was a 60-some unit degree. Did you do it in 2 years? How long did it take you to do it?
I did it in 2.5, almost 3. But one of the reasons was that Viola actually accepted a lot of my theology courses from Liberty, because this tends to be pretty generic. So I didn't have to take a few of the theology courses, so that helped.
Okay.
So
yeah, well, that's pretty close to. I mean, that is a lot of work. I cannot imagine trying to do that. Did you take metaphysics and epistemology the same semester?
No, I did not. Okay. I thank goodness. That would have been. Whew. But no, I think I took metaphysics. I think that was the one semester where I only took one philosophy course. I think they recommended that. They said, listen, don't do more than one philosophy course your first semester. You're going to die. I only did metaphysics. The following semester, then I took epistemology and philosophy of mind at the same time.
Wow. Okay. Who did you have epistemology with?
Guided. That's where we met.
That's where we met. Oh, okay. That's right. Okay. So that would have been in the spring. For him. Okay. Yeah, I substituted.
Spring 2016.
Spring of 2016. That's right. Okay. So I must have come in and done some lectures for the epistemology course. Okay. Yes, we were in the new building. Is that right? And that was a fancy classroom. Building. Yeah, I did not go to school in that building. I think it was the first time I was seeing the building. So that was a fun time. Now you are back in New Jersey, right? You finished your degree, and now you're working on Christian fiction.
Yeah.
This is very interesting because you're the second novelist. Would you say you're a novelist?
I guess I am. It's one of those things where I have massive imposter syndrome. But technically, I've written some novels, so I guess I'm a novelist.
Yeah. You're the second novelist we've had on. and we hope to have many more on. But this is exciting because you're a published novelist. It's awesome. But before we get there,
Mhm.
what was your favorite course at Talbot in the
Ooh.
philosophy program?
My favorite course. You know, I would have to say, can we make it two favorites? Because it's
Can you
tough to
do
pick
can you
one.
do a runner up? Is there enough distinction?
Well, because they're so different. That's the thing. Because put it this way, I have a favorite philosophy class, and then I have a favorite non-philosophy class.
Yeah, so
Put it
that's
that
two
way.
different categories. So
Two different categories. Yeah.
yeah. So,
So
one is the 100-yard dash, and the other one is the 400 relay.
yeah. So for philosophy, I think it was philosophy of mind. And I actually took 2 semesters of that. So that year they introduced an advanced philosophy of mind, and I loved the first one, but the second one, which just went so much deeper, and it was great.
What was the second one called?
It was just called advanced philosophy of mind.
Oh, okay.
And it was just a lot more reading, getting deeper into the different arguments, especially even the different alternative viewpoints. Animalism, and the different kinds of the non-reductive physicalism and things like that.
Okay.
So kind of seeing where people are coming from, why the thinking through how the dualist position, matches up against these things. Again, because it went back to my original reason for wanting to study. Okay, so I've been taught all my life, all right, there's a soul. Okay, but are there some robust arguments for believing there's a soul, right? Is it just
let's unpack that a little bit just so people can follow philosophy of mind. It sounds a little squirrely. Sounds really esoteric if you've never heard the term before. Of course, people might have no idea what you mean by metaphysics, but so
philosophy
and
of
then
mind,
this word dualism, maybe get at that.
Sure. So philosophy of mind is basically it's just a term for the study of philosophical study of consciousness, right? Of thinking through what is consciousness, right? What do we mean by saying that someone is conscious or something is conscious? How do we think about this? And the traditional view for religious people, and actually I think the default view for humans, if we look at a lot of polls that have been done, is that we have this body, but we're something in addition to that.
Yeah.
There seems to be something more, right? I believe there's been studies done where they've asked children all over the world if they think that they could survive the death of their body. And universally, the answer is yes, across different religions and cultures. So that we seem to have an intuition that we might be just more than just a bag of meat and bones.
Right. We certainly think of ourselves that way.
Sure. Yeah. It seems to be a default.
We don't always
position.
talk that way, but yeah.
So then philosophy of mind is kind of getting at that. Well, what does that mean? What does that look like? If we are something else, well, what kind of other thing would we be? Is that all we are? Is there like some little guy driving a little body around? Or is there some more tightly coupled relationship between whatever this other thing might be and this body? Because it seems that obviously I can see my body, I can touch it, but I seem to be directly aware of things that aren't just my body. Like I have these things that we call thoughts and feelings and emotions and sensations, and it seems that they're not exactly the same thing as my body. We think about the brain. Well, is the brain your mind, or is the brain something in addition to your mind? So it's kind of those kinds of questions that get asked in philosophy of mind. So yeah, that was my favorite philosophy course.
That's great. I'm with you on all of that. So you're a dualist, would you say?
Yeah, definitely a dualist of sorts. There's a lot of different nuances there.
That's right. That's right. At the basic level though, with the position of dualism is that you're not the same thing as your body.
Yeah, you're not
You're
identical to your
something
body.
else. Yeah, you're something else that's not physical.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that's fair?
Sort of, yes. I mean, I think
You have a body.
I hope you have a body, exactly. And I think that there's a close, very tightly coupled relationship between your body and this immaterial part of you.
Yeah.
Such that I don't think that you're probably fully human without a body. I think that to be human is to be embodied. But
Okay.
certainly what holds your identity, like yourself, isn't your body, right? Is this other thing. Right?
Okay.
Normally we use the word soul for this, immaterial part. There's a bunch of terms you could use to kind of cash this out. But certainly we're not just this meat bag, right? There's something else there.
Right. So you can survive the death of your body.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the thing that survives really is you.
Mm-hmm.
So you're designed to have a body. So obviously God doesn't want you to be permanently disembodied, but
Mm-hmm.
whatever you is still there after
Mm-hmm.
death.
Exactly.
So there's obviously apologetic significance to this, because
yeah, definitely.
a lot of people think that when you die, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least they pretend to think that. I'm not sure they really do, but
what's the expression? Is there's no atheists in foxholes.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, I think a lot of people convince themselves that they really do believe that, but death is mysterious, and it seems to be very common, almost a built-in view that this world is not all there is. So obviously what happens after death, and can you know anything about that, and is there anything you can do to live after death? That's been a major human concern for a long time, and a lot of discussion. It's interesting to me that our public schools don't pay much attention to that at all. Like, at least some views. I think a lot of the public schools just assume a materialist view, and then if you want to tack on something supernatural on your own time, that's what church is for, or synagogue, or something like that. And but as far as on class time, we're going to teach you like kind of materialistic metaphysics. Not that we know what the term metaphysics means. Yeah.
It's there's a lot to talk about there. That could be a whole discussion of a whole other podcast.
Okay.
But
yeah.
But I would
well,
say
did you want to indicate briefly before you talk about your fiction, what do you want to indicate what you meant by that?
Sure.
More there.
So my children have special needs. So I've always been involved in meetings with our teachers, and all kinds of therapists, and looking at the type of work that's being done with them and the type of therapies that are being applied. And I remember very early on seeing a form that was handed to me on some of the things that were being done, and it was literally some work where it's basically done by Skinner. And this kind of therapies that were developed but the basis was established by Skinner, who is the quintessential kind of physicalist, right? He rejected the notion that we were anything other than just this bag of meat, and furthermore, he just thought that we were just kind of these input-output machines, right? We were just like this behavioral machines that you feed certain inputs, you're going to get certain outputs. There really wasn't anything other than that to human beings. So I found it fascinating that as I'm hearing these teachers tell me how they're going to employ these therapies for my children, which have utility, but I feel that it's so easy to ignore that is not just all humans are, right? That we are more than just these input-output machines, and even going deeper into these things, into some of these areas where they'll acknowledge it. right? You have behaviorists who'll acknowledge like, yeah, there might be something else going on, but that's outside our purview. We don't even want to deal with that. We just kind of pretend like it's not there. So yeah, that I have a lot to say about that as well. But
yeah, B.F. Skinner. The guy's name is B.F. Skinner. If you want to run that down. All right, so you got that's incredible. You have special needs kids. Are both of them special needs?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they have different conditions. One has Down syndrome. The other one has he has ADHD and a smattering of other minor conditions.
That's a lot to deal with.
God
has given you lots of patience, I guess.
People always note that, but because both of my kids have special needs, that's just normalcy for me. Right? It's not like I had a kid that didn't have special needs, so I know what it is to not have a kid with special needs. I don't know what that is. So it's kind of just like, well, that just is what it is to have kids for me.
Wow. I don't even know enough to ask any interesting or intelligent questions, just because I don't know enough. I'm not leveled up on what the issues that you deal with are, and especially like in terms of education and just raising them. So
it's it's very much the same as any other parent. I have very much the same concerns as any other parent, making sure that they don't grow up to be little turds. And, it's concerns are very similar. Obviously, there's going to be some additional concerns.
You're saying there's still the sin nature of the kids?
Absolutely.
There's still original sin?
Absolutely. I saw it from day one. It's like, right? I was very quickly dissuaded from any notion that my kid was anything other than a low down, dirty sinner, just like I was.
In need of a savior?
Absolutely.
Obviously, that's forefront in your mind is how do you make sure that they hear the gospel clearly and can take it in and respond.
And you'd be surprised. My kids have asked me very piercing questions throughout the years, just from listening from things in Sunday school, and they've come up to me, both of them, and asked me questions like, okay, where did God come from? Where Jesus is in heaven too. Jesus is God. How is that possible? These are questions that have come up for them where I'm like, these are questions that typical kids are asking, and my kids who have special needs have heard enough, and it's crystallized enough where they're able to think about these things and ask the questions. So that has been encouraging for me.
Do they are they responsive to the gospel? Have you shared that obviously with them? Yeah,
I've shared that with them. They're definitely, they love going to church. I don't know if for church's sake or for other reasons, but they're definitely, it's definitely a social experience for them. Which church is
just like everybody else. Yeah,
just like
everybody else in 2000 years.
Yeah. And I try to live the gospel, I think, as best as I can within my limited and broken self. And hope that they obviously can see it through me, as well as the things that I can teach them within their capacity to understand.
Yeah. Now, do they like fiction?
They do.
Your kids like fiction? Was that part of the interest you had in writing Christian fiction?
So no, it actually didn't come from my kids, because the books are way beyond where they would be. So to finish answering the question we had talked about before, my second favorite course, and that'll segue into why I started writing. Okay. It was actually spiritual formation, and dealing. And I know people had varied experiences with that class, but one of the things that really impacted me was thinking about power and how Christians have used power throughout, within church experience, and both at a leadership level and at a personal level, and what Christian power looks like. And I remember I shared this with my best friend. A lot of the stuff, like I would get it. Basically, I would hear the lecture and then I would like regurgitate the lecture to my friend. So he kind of got the degree vicariously through me as well.
Is this your co-author?
Yeah, it's my co-author. This is Gam Rodriguez.
Gam Rodriguez, okay.
Yeah, and I remember you thinking through these things, and around a few years back, I want to say maybe 4 years ago, he comes up to me, and we'd always talked about what would it look like to write a story where we could kind of wrap in a lot of these themes of things that we've experienced growing up, and then some of these things that that we've been learning. And he actually got started on one. He got started on the story, and he brought me in and he says, "Hey, listen, could you help me kind of edit this thing? I actually wrote this thing out, and I need some help." So I sat down with him. I said, "Sure." I was actually done with school at the time. So I said I graduated in 2018. So I said, "Sure, let's get to it." So I remember sitting down with him, and we literally worked through the entire book, and we kind of rewrote it in some ways. Like the whole skeleton stayed there, but we just kind of reworked a lot of things and added a lot of things to kind of expand, do a lot of world building. And I remember when we finally finished, he saved we were doing that on a Word document that we would that we shared, so we could both make changes. He was in New Jersey, I was in California, and when I look at the top, he said, "Oh, by the way, make sure you look at the heading." And I look at the heading, and he wrote his name, and he wrote my name right after it as an author. He says, "Look, you've worked with this with me. You've gone over every word, every line of this book as much as I have. So you're a co-author with me." So we started the process of trying to get published, and we submitted to a bunch of literary agents, and we looked at any publishers who would accept direct submissions as well, and we just kept getting no's, right? And just got tons of rejections, or even worse, most of the time they don't even get back to you, so you don't even know, right? You're just like, I guess it's a no. It's been 3 months,
right?
We even tried, like, for example, competitions that there are for like new authors to try to help you connect with like published authors to help you work on your manuscripts, and so nothing would work. We tried to do Christian publishing companies, but and I want to be careful here. This, right? It was our experience that Christian publishing companies are looking for a very specific kind of content, which is very much like stories that are kind of like very much have this come to Jesus moment. They're very kind of like they're Hallmarky, if that makes sense. They're like the Hallmark movie version of stories, where everything is just very neatly wrapped up in a bow. It's very kind of
well, that's what real life is like, though, right, Daniel?
Oh, absolutely. Right.
That's what Venezuela's like. I mean, look how nice that was. Look at America. That's how we are.
Yeah, it's all nice and neat, and at the end of the day, you have a little theme song, and everyone's happy. So the Christian publishers turned to want that sort of story. So it wasn't a good fit for us with the Christian publishers, and I think for the non-Christian publishers, it was too religious. So we were just kind of stuck in the middle.
That's amazing.
So we were kind of about to give up on the whole publishing route, and we were saying, well, maybe we'll just self-publish it. I remember we got one response, and we were like, oh, okay. So we have this meeting, and this person's like, your book is amazing. Your book is awesome. Oh, we can't wait to publish it. And we're like, oh my God, this is great. And they're like, you just have to pay us this amount. We're like, what? So it was like this vanity press, sorry. And we're like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not spending money, whatever.
Yeah.
So we were just about to give up on the whole thing, and finally, like, there was this company that comes around that we find. I think my friend found, and they were asking for submissions, and we were like, at this point, we don't have very high hopes for this, but we submit, and once the submission goes out, we hear back, and they're like, we want to meet with you guys. And we're like, probably another vanity press. There's no way. So we get to talking, and it turns out to be a real publisher, and they liked our book. And they said, we have some feedback. We have part of the team, and so we have beta readers, we have editors, we have all these things that are going to work. We have artists that are going to create everything. You just need to, these are, we have a contract, we have all these things, and we want to sign you for 3 books. So we had only done 1 book. So we want to sign you for 3 books. We like to publish, especially new authors, we like to publish in a quick release cycle, get your stuff out there, and for you to have multiple books. So we said, okay. So we get some feedback, and the feedback, we think, man, this has ripped our book apart, but it helped us grow as authors. And we had to, go back and rework a bunch of stuff. We had a bunch of plot holes, but I think it helped our story come along. And one of the things that we really wanted to do is we wanted to tell a story that was interesting in itself, aside from the message or any themes that we wanted to touch on. Because I think what happens with a lot of Christian fiction and Christian fantasy is that the message takes the forefront, which it's very important, it's vital, but often it does so at the cost of the artistry, right? At the cost of the actual storytelling. So you end up with an amazing message, a very clear presentation of the gospel, and it's like some campy, silly story that just it lacks universal appeal. And we wanted our story to have universal appeal. Obviously, not comparing ourselves at all to these people like these, right? These are masters at their craft, but sort of like C.S. Lewis or like J.R.R. Tolkien, right? Who their stories have that universal appeal, even though they're deeply grounded within their Christian worldview, and the themes that are dealt with are very much Christian themes. They could still have this universal appeal where someone can enjoy the story as just a good story. And that's something that we wanted to do. And also we wanted to write Christian fantasy that kind of walked an interesting edge, which was it's set in modern times, but it's set in kind of a world with an alternative history. So it's kind
what's
of like
the genre again? Say it again.
So the genre is urban fantasy.
Urban fantasy. Okay.
Yeah. So it's So as opposed to something like high fantasy. High fantasy is you're talking about like elves and orcs and magic and usually like a medieval type setting. So urban fantasy is set in modern times, but it's going to have some type of fantastical element to it. So our kind of story is set in modern times, and as we're both Hispanic, the main protagonist is a 21-year-old Latina from the Bronx.
How do you know Gam?
So me and Gam have known each other since we were 9 years old. Well, since I was 9 years old. He's a couple of years older than me.
In New Jersey?
In New Jersey. So he was actually part of the church that my dad went to pastor when I was 9 years old. So we've known each other, most of our lives.
Spanish speaker?
Yeah, Spanish speaker. He was born in Puerto Rico. Okay. No, he's born in Puerto Rico, but was raised here. So yeah, we've known each other most of our lives. We've been friends for a very, very long time.
Cool. So you're telling me about the main character is Latina from the Bronx.
Yeah, from the Bronx. And
is her name AOC by chance?
No, it's not. The first initial is A. Her name is Angelica. But basically, we told a story in an alternate universe, so to speak, right? It's like a what if. Well, what if reality had been this way? And we drew heavily from the story of the Nephilim from the Book of Enoch. And which for those who might not know, it's a apocryphal writing that suggests that there were angels who had relations with human women, and they had these children who were hybrids, half angel, half human. Some fanciful writing, but we kind of said, well, what if that was true? And what if that had been going on in the background of history, throughout all of history? And a lot of notable characters throughout history had been these types of hybrids. And what would that look like in today's world, in a modern setting, with this kind of hidden sort of thing happening in the background?
Wow.
And one of the things, like I said, we wanted to touch on the notion of power. And so one of the things we did in the book was, borrowing from the Book of Enoch, we took the whole concept that these Nephilim were mighty beings who had kind of like superpowers. But we noted that in the writings of Enoch and those things, they never talked about female Nephilim. They only talked about male Nephilim. So we thought, well, what about if there were a female offspring? What would that be like? And one of the things we thought about, well, what if they don't have the same kinds of powers? And because of that, their fathers would have rejected them, but they actually become sort of like the saviors of humanity, because what they can do is oppose their brothers, in a sense, and kind of fight for the sake of humanity. Wow. So what does it look like when we think about a challenge of how we think about martial might and power, obviously, and how victory doesn't always come through the greatest martial might, true victory, and how that's reflected, obviously, in the Christian story. How in the Christian story, the weak are the strong, the poor call themselves rich. Life comes through death. Those who want to gain their life will lose it, but those who lose their lives for the sake of Christ will gain it. So the kind of inversion of what we might think as intuitive when it comes to power, how that's played out in Christian story, we tried to kind of develop that through our themes in these books.
Wow. That's very thoughtful. Now, I don't want to give you, I don't want any spoiler alerts, but there's no pictures in this, right?
There's a picture on the cover, but there are no pictures in the book.
How did you get the picture for the cover?
So we worked with an amazing artist. I think she's based out of Eastern Europe somewhere, and she does work for the publishing company that we signed up with. And we worked with her, and we kind of told her the ideas that we had, and she just kept coming up with concepts until we kind of met in between and found like this really great concept. We're really happy with the artwork she was able to come up with.
Throw a title out there for me. I'm going to look on Amazon.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, it's on Amazon. The name of the series is called The Progeny Wars. The Progeny Wars. The name of the first book is called Daughters of the Watchers. We've written 3 books so far. So we've written Daughters of the Watchers, Sons of the Lords, and the Children of Men. And our publisher was happy with how the books have sold so far. So they actually signed us up to round out the series with 3 more books. Yep, this is the first book, Daughters of the Watchers. So you see there, my pen name is DJ Vargas, and you can see my picture there on the bottom left.
There you are.
There I am.
And there's GZ Rodriguez. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
There's Gam. Yeah, so we have the 3 books.
That's cool.
Children of the Mortals, rather, is the name of the. I forgot. Children of Men was actually the name of a movie.
Wow.
Children of the Mortals. And we're working on 3 more books. So we're working on book 4 right now. And hopefully we should have it done by the end of this month, and hopefully it should be published soon. So
cool.
Yeah, if you're interested in Christian fiction and fantasy books, just for leisure reading, or just to look at some of the themes that we developed throughout the books, definitely be great for you to give it a try. It's available in Kindle Unlimited for those who have this subscription to Kindle Unlimited. It's a free read. So if you already have the subscription, you can pick it up and read it.
This looks like a lot of work, man. You were obviously very dedicated to this. That's awesome.
It took us quite a while to do this book. Yeah, the first one, it took us a good year and a half.
I love what you said about martial power, the reflection on that. I mean, part of how I know you, and I got permission to share this, so but is at the gun range. You and me went shooting. I think I kind of walked you through picking out your first pistol here in California. Is that fair to say? Yeah,
it was the first time I shot a gun. So
you got a CZ.
Yep.
Is that right? Yeah, that's a good. I love the CZ. It's a Czech-made pistol. So I mean, you've obviously thought you've had a gun in your hands. You value legal self-defense. And so the reflection on martial might and power from a Christian perspective sounds very interesting. Obviously, your co-author has the same concerns that you do. Is he pro Second Amendment as well, Gam?
Yeah, I don't think he owns any guns, but I think he's definitely pro legal self-defense.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you're not coming at this from a pacifistic perspective necessarily.
No. Okay. And we do deal with some of these themes. Like I brought in a lot of my theological training, a lot of my philosophical training, and asking some of these tough questions, like, what does it look like to oppose evil? What does it look like to resist? We actually even bring up some discussions on Bonhoeffer in the book.
Cool.
And kind of thinking through those things within the weaving of the story. Obviously, we're not pontificating. All right, I think we try to make it interesting, but kind of involving these themes in the book.
So Angelica, this is Angelica here on the screen. Okay. So she's Latina from the Bronx. You said it was an alternative history, but obviously a place like the Bronx exists. Is it
exactly? It's an alternative history, but it's still kind of like
you can recognize the Bronx. Like
exactly, you can recognize most of the world looks almost exactly the same. It's just that there's been this hidden sort of war happening behind the scenes.
Interesting.
For control of humanity.
There's something behind her there.
Yeah, there's a dark shadow behind her, a figure, and that's a figure you get to know in the book and how it's related to her, and how she is related to all of these kind of the secret war that's happening in the background.
So it's not like The Walking Dead or something where it just goes nowhere. Is there a
No, there's
redemptive arc? Is there a redemptive arc?
there is,
Okay.
but it's very character driven. So there's redemptive arcs within our characters. We deal with a lot of concepts. We did the concepts of what friendship looks like, what forgiveness looks like and doesn't look like. We try to really look at these themes deeply and thoughtfully, and without kind of insulting the reader and just giving them like just easy answers. There's some questions that we actually leave open and say, yeah, this is hard. Yeah, this is something you have to think through.
And this is written for adults, or would you say
Yeah, it's a young
teenagers?
adult. Yeah, young
Okay,
adult to adults. Maybe mature teenagers. We purposely avoided like 4-letter words to make it more accessible.
Gotcha.
But
Would you
there's some
say
violence and
what
things like that in
rating
there.
is it? What rating is it? G or
No, I wouldn't say it was G. It's probably PG-13.
PG-13? Okay,
Sure.
cool. Well, Dan, we know that you are on a hard stop here. We got to let you go. We're so grateful for you coming on and talking about it, your fiction and your background, and maybe parents are across the land or young people in college interested in checking out your fantasy books. We'll check it out and give you some sales.
That'd be great. We appreciate every single one. Even a single one it's amazing. Thank you so much.
Dan is a solid guy. I know him personally. He's got a really great educational background. I've been to the shooting range with him. He's a solid guy. Wonderful backstory. So wonderful family. Obviously, he's working on this fiction with Gam. I'm not sure who Gam is besides what Dan has said, but if he's friends with Dan, he's got to be an amazing guy. And we're really happy that you came on the podcast to give us our second episode on fiction.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a blast.